The sound of metal hitting wood echoed through the dusty trading post as Lila Kendrick watched her brother count the gleaming bullets one by one, his eyes reflecting a greed she had never seen before. She stood there in the corner of Henderson's General Store in Oatman, Arizona, her worn calico dress covered in trail dust from their 3-day journey, and realized with growing horror that Thomas was actually going through with it. The year was 1883, and she had just turned 19 that spring, old enough to understand that what was happening would change her life forever, yet young enough to feel the crushing weight of betrayal settle into her bones like the desert heat that never seemed to leave this God-forsaken territory. Thomas had always been weak, but she never imagined he would sink this low. Their parents had died of fever the previous winter, leaving them with nothing but a failing homestead and debts that seemed to multiply like rabbits. She had worked her fingers raw trying to keep them afloat, taking in washing and mending, but Thomas had spent what little money they earned on whiskey and cards. Now he stood before Silas Henderson, a man whose reputation for trafficking in human misery was known throughout the Arizona Territory, and negotiated her future like she was nothing more than livestock. She is healthy, can cook and clean, and she will not give you any trouble, Thomas said, his voice carrying that wheedling tone he always used when trying to close a bad deal. The rifle and 500 rounds, that is what we agreed upon. Lila felt her throat constrict. 500 rounds of ammunition and a Winchester rifle. That was her worth to her only living blood relative. She wanted to scream, to run, to fight. But Henderson had 2 armed men standing by the door, and she knew the law in Oatman would not help her. Women had few rights, and brothers had authority over unmarried sisters. The injustice of it burned hotter than the Arizona sun. Henderson scratched his tobacco-stained beard and looked her over with cold, calculating eyes. "She is a bit thin." "She is strong," Thomas insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "You will not find better for the price." The trading post door swung open with a creak that cut through their conversation like a knife. Lila looked up and saw a man silhouetted against the bright afternoon light, tall and broad-shouldered, with a black hat pulled low over his face. He stepped inside, and as her eyes adjusted, she could make out his features. He was young, maybe 25 or 26, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. A gun belt hung low on his hips, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who knew how to use them. "Henderson," the man said, his voice deep and measured. "I am here for that saddle you were supposed to have ready 2 days ago." "Quinn Vance?" Henderson said, and Lila detected a note of wariness in the trader's voice. "I was not expecting you until tomorrow." Plans changed. Quinn's gray eyes swept the room and landed on Lila. For a moment their gazes locked, and she saw something flicker across his face. Recognition, maybe, though they had never met. Or perhaps it was simply acknowledgement of what he was witnessing. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "We were just conducting some business, mister, if you could wait outside." "What kind of business?" Quinn asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "Private business," Henderson snapped. "Between me and the lady's brother." Quinn took a step closer, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. "That's so? Because from where I stand, it looks like you are buying a woman like she is a horse." "It is legal," Henderson said, though he took a half step back. "Her brother has the right." "I know what the law says." Quinn's jaw tightened. "Does not make it right." Lila found her voice, though it came out shakier than she would have liked. "Please, I do not want this." Thomas whirled on her. "You do not have a choice, Lila. We are destitute. This is the only way." "The only way for you to get your rifle, you mean?" she shot back, anger finally overcoming her fear. "You are selling your sister so you can go hunting." "That is enough." Thomas raised his hand and Lila flinched despite herself. The hand never fell. Quinn had crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and caught Thomas's wrist in an iron grip. "Touch her, and it will be the last thing you do." Thomas paled and tried to pull away, but Quinn held firm. Henderson's men reached for their guns, but Quinn's free hand was already hovering over his own weapon, and something in his eyes made them hesitate. "Let me go," Thomas whimpered. "This is none of your concern." "I am making it my concern." Quinn released Thomas with enough force to send him stumbling backward. Then he turned to Henderson. "How much does he owe you?" Henderson's eyes narrowed with calculation. "We had agreed on—" "I am not asking what you agreed on. I am asking how much you think a human life is worth in dollars and cents so I can prove you wrong." The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Lila watched this stranger, this Quinn Vance, stand between her and a fate she could not bear to imagine, and wondered what kind of man would risk his life for someone he had never met. Henderson finally spoke, choosing his words carefully. "The rifle and ammunition he wants would cost about $40 at fair price." Quinn pulled a leather pouch from his vest and counted out coins onto the counter with deliberate precision. "Here is $80, 40 for the rifle and bullets, which you will give to her brother so this transaction is complete. The other 40 is for the lady, who is free to make her own choices." "Now wait just a minute, Mom," Thomas protested. "That is not what we agreed." "Take the money and the rifle and get out," Quinn said quietly, but there was steel beneath the words, "before I change my mind and give you something else instead." Thomas looked at the gleaming Winchester leaning against the counter, at the boxes of ammunition Henderson was already pushing toward him, and whatever fight he had died in the face of Quinn's cold stare. He grabbed the rifle and bullets and made for the door, pausing only long enough to look back at Lila with something that might have been shame or resentment, she could not tell which, and found she no longer cared. "You are on your own now," Thomas muttered, and then he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him with a finality that echoed through Lila's chest. The silence that followed was deafening. Henderson pocketed the money with a grunt and disappeared into the back room, his men trailing after him. Lila stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. One moment she had been property being bartered away, and the next she was free, saved by a stranger who had paid twice what her brother had asked. Quinn picked up the coins he had laid out for her and held them toward her. "This is yours." She stared at the money, then at him. "Why did you do that?" "Because it was the right thing to do." "You do not even know me." "I know enough." He pressed the coins into her hand, his fingers warm against her palm. "I know that no person should be bought or sold, and I know that you deserved better than what was about to happen." Lila closed her fingers around the money, feeling the weight of it, the promise of possibility it represented. $40 was more than she had ever held at once. It could buy her a stagecoach ticket, a new dress, meals for weeks. But even as she cataloged the options, she realized she had nowhere to go. No family, no friends, no home to return to. "Thank you," she said, and hated how small her voice sounded. "I do not know how I will ever repay you. You do not owe me anything." Quinn adjusted his hat and turned toward the counter, raising his voice. "Henderson, my saddle!" The trader emerged with a well-worn but quality saddle and dumped it on the counter without ceremony. Quinn inspected it with a critical eye, testing the stitching and the integrity of the leather, before nodding his approval. He slung it over his shoulder with practiced ease and headed for the door. Lila watched him go, this man who had appeared like something out of a dime novel and changed everything. She should let him leave, should take her money and figure out her own path. But her feet were moving before her mind caught up, carrying her out into the blazing afternoon sun. "Mr. Vance," she called. He stopped beside a magnificent bay horse tied to the hitching post and looked back at her, squinting against the light. "Madam? Where are you headed?" Something shifted in his expression, a wariness that had not been there before. "Why do you ask?" "Because I have nowhere to go," she admitted, the words bitter as they left her mouth. "My brother sold everything we owned before he tried to sell me. I have no home, no prospects, and $40 that will run out eventually. Quinn set the saddle down and studied her with those storm cloud eyes. What are you suggesting? I can work, I can cook, clean, mend, tend animals. I am not asking for charity, just a chance to earn my keep until I can figure out what comes next. You want to come with me? I want to not starve or end up sold to someone else the moment I'm alone in this town, she said bluntly. You seem like a decent man, which is more than I can say for most I've met lately. If you are headed somewhere that needs workers, I would like to try. Quinn was quiet for a long moment, and Lila could see the debate playing out behind his eyes. Finally, he sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. I am headed to my ranch about 15 miles north of here. It is not much, just me and my foreman and about 200 head of cattle. The last cook quit a month ago, said it was too isolated, and she missed civilization. I am not afraid of isolation. It is hard work. I am not afraid of hard work either. He smiled then, just a slight quirk of his lips, but it transformed his face from severe to almost handsome. I believe you. All right, Miss Kendrick, you can come along and see if you like the place. If it suits, we will work out wages. If it does not, I will bring you back to town or to wherever you want to go. Fair? Relief flooded through her so intensely she felt dizzy. More than fair, thank you. Do not thank me yet. You have not seen the place. He gestured to his horse. Do you ride? Yes. Good. We will get you a horse and supplies, and we can leave before sundown. True to his word, Quinn took her to the livery and paid for a gentle sorrel mare that looked at Lila with kind eyes. He also insisted on buying her proper riding clothes, a bedroll, and provisions, waving away her protests that she could use her own money. Save it, he said simply. You might need it later. They rode out of Oatman as the sun began its descent toward the jagged mountains on the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. The heat was beginning to break, replaced by the cooler air that made the Arizona territory bearable once darkness fell. Lila rode beside Quinn in silence, adjusting to the rhythm of the horse beneath her and trying not to think about the fact that she was riding off into the wilderness with a man she had met only hours ago. But when she glanced over at him, at the easy way he sat his horse and the calm competence in every movement, she felt the knot of anxiety in her chest loosen slightly. He had stood up for her when no one else would. He had given her a chance when he could have just walked away. That had to count for something. Tell me about your ranch, she said, breaking the comfortable silence. Quinn considered the question as they navigated a rocky stretch of trail. It is called the Rocking V. My father started it 20 years ago when this was still wild country. He died 5 years back, left it to me. We run cattle, mostly sell to the mining camps and the army. It is honest work, if not particularly profitable. You run it alone? I have a foreman, Jack Copper. He has been with the family since the beginning. Good man, knows cattle better than anyone I've ever met. We hire on extra hands during roundup and branding, but most of the time it is just the two of us. And you have been without a cook for a month? He grimaced. Can you tell by looking at me? Lila studied him more carefully. He was lean but not thin. His clothes clean if worn. You look like you know which end of a skillet to use. I can manage not to poison myself, but that's about the extent of my culinary skills. Jack is worse. We have been living on beans and jerky and whatever we can shoot. A proper meal would be welcome. Then I will make sure you get proper meals, Lila promised. It is the least I can do. Quinn looked over at her, his expression serious. You do not owe me anything, Miss Kendrick. I meant what I said back in town. What I did was just basic human decency, not something that needs repayment. Maybe not, she allowed, but I still intend to earn my place. I am not a charity case. Never thought you were. He smiled again, that same small expression that made her heart do an unexpected flutter. Something tells me you are tougher than you look. They rode on as the sky darkened, and the first stars began to appear overhead. Lila felt the soreness of the long ride settling into her muscles, but she did not complain. This was her new beginning, her chance to build something from the ashes of everything she had lost. She would not waste it. The ranch appeared as a cluster of dark shapes against the darker landscape outlined by the warm glow of lamplight from a single window. As they drew closer, Lila could make out a main house, a barn, a corral with horses moving like shadows, and several outbuildings whose purposes she could only guess at. It was bigger than she had expected, more established, and she felt a flutter of nervousness at the thought of being responsible for keeping such a place running. An older man emerged from the barn carrying a lantern, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he saw Quinn. "About time you got back. I was starting to think Henderson had talked you into a card game." "You know I do not play cards with Henderson." Quinn dismounted and began unsaddling his horse with efficient movements. "Jack, this is Miss Lila Kendrick. She's going to be our new cook, if the place suits her." Jack raised the lantern higher, and Lila saw surprise and curiosity flicker across his lined face. He was probably in his 50s, with silver threading through his dark hair and the kind of sun-weathered skin that spoke of decades working outdoors. "That so? Well, welcome to the Rocking V, Miss Kendrick. We're glad to have you." "Thank you," Lila said, climbing down from her mare with less grace than Quinn had shown. Her legs wobbled slightly and she grabbed the saddle to steady herself. "Let me help with that," Quinn said, appearing at her side. He took the reins from her hand. "Jack, can you shove Miss Kendrick to the spare room? I will take care of the horses." "Sure thing." Jack gestured toward the house with his free hand. "This way, miss. Watch your step. The yard can be treacherous in the dark." Lila followed him across the packed earth to the main house, grateful for the lantern light that illuminated the path. Inside, the house was simple but well-maintained, with sturdy furniture and a large fireplace dominating one wall of the main room. A kitchen occupied one corner, and she could see a hallway leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. "This here is the main living area," Jack explained. "Kitchen is pretty well stocked, though you might want to take inventory tomorrow and let us know what you need. Your room is down here, first door on the left." He led her down the hallway and opened a door to reveal a small but clean bedroom with a single bed, a dresser, and a window that probably looked out over the desert during daylight. A basin and pitcher sat on the dresser, and there were even fresh linens on the bed. "We have been keeping it ready just in case," Jack said. "Hope it suits." "It is perfect," Lila said honestly. After sleeping on the ground during their journey and facing the prospect of whatever Henderson had planned for her, this simple room felt like a palace. "Thank you." Breakfast is usually around sunrise, dinner after the day's work is done. We are not particular about much, but we do appreciate food that is not burned or moving on its own. Jack's eyes twinkled with humor. "Think you can manage that?" "I think I can handle it." "Good. Well, I will let you settle in. Outhouse is around back, and there is a pump in the kitchen for water. If you need anything, just holler." He tipped his hat and left, closing the door softly behind him. Lila stood in the center of her new room and felt the events of the day finally catch up with her. She sank onto the bed and buried her face in her hands, letting herself shake with the terror and relief and confusion that she had been holding back for hours. She had been so close to losing everything, her freedom, her dignity, her very self. If Quinn Vance had not walked through that door at precisely the right moment, she would be Henderson's property now, facing a future too horrible to contemplate. Instead, she was here, in a clean room on a working ranch, with the promise of honest work and fair wages. She had been given a second chance, and she vowed not to waste it. After allowing herself a few minutes to compose herself, Lila unpacked her few belongings and washed her face in the basin. She was exhausted, but her mind was too active for sleep. She found herself thinking about Quinn Vance, about the way he had stood up to Henderson without hesitation, the way he had treated her with respect and dignity when her own brother had valued her less than a gun. He was different from any man she had known, and she could not quite figure him out. She also could not deny the way her pulse had quickened when he smiled at her, or the warmth she had felt when he took her hand to give her the money. She had never had time for romantic notions, too busy trying to survive and take care of Thomas, but something about Quinn stirred feelings she had thought long buried. "Stop it," she told herself firmly. He saved you out of decency, nothing more. Do not complicate things by developing feelings for your employer. But as she finally climbed into bed and pulled the clean blankets over her, she could not quite banish the memory of those gray eyes or the quiet strength in his voice. She fell asleep thinking about second chances and wondering if perhaps fate had brought her exactly where she needed to be. The next morning, Lila woke before dawn, her body conditioned by years of early rising. She dressed quickly in her work clothes and made her way to the kitchen, determined to prove her worth immediately. The kitchen was better equipped than she had expected, with a good cast iron stove, plenty of pots and pans, and a well-organized pantry stocked with flour, beans, coffee, dried meat, and various spices. She had biscuits in the oven and bacon sizzling in a pan when Quinn emerged from his room, his hair slightly mussed and his eyes still heavy with sleep. He stopped in the doorway when he saw her, surprise registering on his face. "You did not have to start so early," he said. "I would have understood if you needed more rest after yesterday." "I am used to early mornings," Lila replied, cracking eggs into another pan. "Besides, you hired me to cook. Might as well start doing the job." Quinn poured himself a cup of coffee from the pot she had prepared and leaned against the counter, watching her work. "You move around a kitchen like you have done this your whole life." "Basically have. My mother taught me before she passed. She said a woman who could cook would never go hungry." Lila flipped the eggs with practiced ease. She was right about that, at least. "I am sorry about your parents, and about your brother." "Do not be sorry about Thomas. He made his choices." Lila plated the food and handed Quinn a full breakfast. "I just wish I had seen what he was capable of before yesterday." "People show their true colors when times get hard," Quinn said, settling at the wooden table. "It is not your fault you wanted to believe the best of your family." Jack came in then, drawn by the smell of cooking food, and his face lit up when he saw the spread Lila had prepared. "Lord have mercy, is that actual bacon? And biscuits? Miss Kendrick, you are an angel sent from heaven." Lila laughed. The first genuine laugh she had managed in what felt like months. "Just doing my job. Sit down and eat before it gets cold." They ate in comfortable silence, broken only by Jack's occasional sounds of appreciation. When they had finished, Quinn pushed back from the table with a satisfied sigh. "That was the best breakfast I have had in a year," he said. Thank you." "You're welcome. What time do you want dinner?" "Usually around 6 after we have finished the day's work, but do not feel like you have to stay in the kitchen all day. You are free to explore the ranch, rest, whatever you need." "Actually," Lila said, gathering the dishes, "if you do not mind, I would like to see the property, get a sense of the place." Quinn exchanged a glance with Jack, and something unspoken passed between them. "I can show you around before we head out to check the fences," Quinn offered, "if you are interested." "I would like that." An hour later, Lila found herself walking beside Quinn through the ranch, learning the layout and purpose of each building. He showed her the barn where they kept the horses, the chicken coop she had not noticed in the dark, the smokehouse, and the root cellar. He pointed out the boundaries of the property and explained the seasonal patterns of ranch work, the rhythms that govern their lives. "It is not an easy life," Quinn said as they stood on a slight rise looking out over the ranch. "The work is hard, and the isolation can weigh on people. But there is something honest about it. You know what you're working for, can see the results of your labor." "It sounds like you love it," Lila observed. "I do. My father used to say that land gets in your blood, becomes part of who you are. I did not understand that when I was younger, but I do now." He looked at her, his expression earnest. "What about you, Miss Kendrick? What do you want from life?" It was such a simple question, but Lila found she did not have a simple answer. She had spent so long focused on survival that she had never allowed herself to want anything more. "I want to build something," she said slowly. "Not necessarily a ranch or a business, but a life that is mine. A place where I belong and do not have to be afraid." "That seems like a reasonable thing to want." "What about you? What do you want?" Quinn was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "I want this place to thrive. I want to honor my father's memory by making the rocking V into something that lasts. And I want—" He trailed off, seeming to reconsider his words. "What?" Lila prompted gently. "I want someone to share it with," he admitted, and there was a vulnerability in his voice that made her heart ache. "It gets lonely out here, having all this but no one to really share it with. Jack is great, but he is my foreman, not family. I guess I want what my parents had, a partnership built on respect and affection." Lila felt a warmth spreading through her chest at his honesty. That is a good thing to want. Their eyes met and held, and for a moment the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them standing in the desert morning, connected by understanding and possibility. Then Jack's voice calling from the barn broke the spell, and Quinn cleared his throat and stepped back. "I should get to work," he said, "but I'm glad you are here, Miss Kendrick. I think you're going to fit in well." "I think so too." Over the following weeks, Lila settled into the rhythm of ranch life with surprising ease. She woke before dawn to prepare breakfast, spent her days managing the household and experimenting with the limited ingredients available, and had dinner ready when Quinn and Jack returned from their work. In her spare time, she explored the property, tended the small vegetable garden she discovered behind the house, and even learned to care for the chickens. But it was the evenings she treasured most, when the work was done, and they would sit together in the main room. Sometimes they played cards or checkers, sometimes Jack would tell stories about the old days when the territory was still wild and dangerous, and sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence while Lila mended clothes and Quinn worked on his ledgers. She learned that Quinn was 25, just 6 years older than herself. He had grown up on the ranch, learning the business from his father, and had taken over when a riding accident claimed the older man's life. He was thoughtful and kind, with a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was comfortable. He treated her with unfailing respect, never crossing the line from employer to anything inappropriate, but she could feel the pull between them growing stronger with each passing day. For her part, Lila found herself thinking about Quinn at odd moments, remembering the way he laughed at Jack's jokes or the concentration on his face when he was working on a problem. She noticed things like the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck when it got too long, or how his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. She told herself it was gratitude, nothing more, but her heart knew differently. One evening about a month after her arrival, a storm rolled in from the west, bringing with it sheets of rain and thunder that shook the house. Lila was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner when the first clap of thunder made her jump, nearly dropping the plate she was holding. "Oh, that one was close," Quinn said from the doorway. He had changed into dry clothes after getting caught in the first wave of rain. "You all right?" "Just startled. I am not used to storms like this. They can be pretty intense out here. The desert does not get rain often, but when it does, it makes up for lost time." He moved into the kitchen and picked up a dish towel. "Let me help with that." "You do not have to." "I know, but I want to." They worked side by side in companionable silence, Lila washing and Quinn drying, until all the dishes were clean and put away. The storm continued to rage outside, and when they moved into the main room, they found Jack already asleep in his chair, exhausted from a long day of moving cattle. Quinn added wood to the fireplace and gestured for Lila to sit in the other comfortable chair. She did, tucking her feet under her and watching the flames dance behind the grate. The storm created an intimate atmosphere, a sense of being cocooned from the world, and she found herself wanting to say things she had kept hidden. "Quinn," she said softly, and he looked up from stoking the fire. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you really help me that day? I have thought about it a lot, and I still cannot quite understand why a stranger would risk himself for someone he did not know." Quinn set down the poker and settled into the chair across from her, his expression thoughtful. "Do you remember what I said to Henderson? That you were worth more than gold?" "You said I was worth more than what he was offering," Lila corrected. "No, I said you were worth more than gold. I meant it." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "My mother was in a similar situation before she met my father. Her stepfather tried to sell her to pay gambling debts. My father happened to be there and intervened, much like I did with you. She used to tell me that story and say that sometimes angels come in unexpected forms. I always thought it was a nice story, but did not put much stock in it until that day in Henderson's store. You saw me and thought of your mother? I saw you and thought that no one should have to endure what you were facing. I saw the fear in your eyes, but also the strength, the determination not to give in. And I thought that someone like that deserved a chance. He paused, his gray eyes intense. But I would be lying if I said that was the only reason I brought you here. Lila's heart began to pound. What do you mean? I mean that the moment I looked at you, I felt something I had never felt before. A connection, a recognition of something I did not even know I was looking for. I told myself I was just doing the right thing, being a good person, but the truth is I wanted to know you. I wanted the chance to see if what I felt in that moment was real or just my imagination. And Lila could barely breathe. Was it real? Quinn stood and crossed to her chair, kneeling beside it so they were at eye level. Every day you have been here has made it more real. Every smile, every laugh, every moment we have shared has confirmed what I suspected from the start. You are extraordinary, Lila Kendrick. You are strong and kind and capable, and you have brought life back to this place in ways I did not even realize were missing. Quinn, she whispered, reaching out to touch his face. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, the stubble on his jaw rough against her palm. I feel it too. I have tried not to, tried to tell myself I was just grateful or confused, but I cannot deny it anymore. When I am with you, I feel safe and seen and valued in a way I have never experienced before. You are valued, Quinn said fervently. You are worth more than all the gold in the world, more than anything I could ever offer. But I am offering it anyway, all of it. This ranch, my life, my heart, if you will have them. Lila felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. Yes, she said simply, yes to all of it. Quinn rose and pulled her to her feet, and then his arms were around her and his lips were on hers, and nothing in Lila's life had ever felt so right. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of breaking the spell, but then it deepened, became something more urgent and passionate, all the weeks of restrained feelings finally finding release. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Lila. I think I have loved you since that first day. I love you too, she replied, and saying the words felt like coming home. I did not think I could ever trust anyone again after what Thomas did, but you showed me that not all people are cruel. You showed me what real kindness looks like. They stood there wrapped in each other's arms as the storm raged outside and Jack snored softly in his chair, oblivious to the declaration that had just taken place. Eventually they separated, both aware that rushing things would not be proper, but the promise of the future hung between them like a tangible thing. The following months passed in a haze of happiness and hard work. Quinn courted Lila properly, with walks in the desert evening and small gifts he made with his own hands. He carved her a wooden comb from mesquite wood and fashioned a simple silver ring from a coin. In turn, Lila made him shirts sewn with careful stitches and baked his favorite foods, putting love into every task. Jack watched their growing relationship with obvious approval, often making himself scarce in the evenings to give them time alone. He told Lila one day, while helping her hang laundry, that he had never seen Quinn so happy, so full of life and purpose. You are good for him, Jack said, and he is good for you. Anyone can see that. I never thought I could be this happy, Lila admitted. After everything that happened, I thought my life was over, but it was just beginning. That is the thing about life, Jack replied. Just when you think you know how the story goes, it surprises you. In December, 6 months after Lila arrived at the Rocking V, Quinn asked her to marry him properly. He took her to a ridge overlooking the ranch at sunset, the sky painted in shades of orange and purple, and got down on one knee with the silver ring he had made. Lila Kendrick, you have given me more than I ever dared to hope for. You have made this house a home and filled my life with joy. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Lila pulled him to his feet and kissed him soundly. Yes, Quinn Vance. 1,000 times yes. They were married in Oatman on a crisp January day in 1884, with Jack serving as witness and the local preacher officiating. Lila wore a simple blue dress she had sewn herself, and Quinn wore his best suit. It was not a grand affair, but it was perfect, full of love and promise and hope for the future. Their wedding night was spent at the ranch in Quinn's room that now became theirs. He was gentle and patient, understanding that this was all new to her. And by the time the sun rose on their first day as husband and wife, Lila felt transformed. She had given herself completely to this man who valued her, cherished her, and loved her for exactly who she was. Life as Quinn's wife was everything Lila had never known she wanted. They worked together during the day, building the ranch into something more prosperous and successful, and spent their evenings planning and dreaming together. Quinn consulted her on business decisions, valued her opinions, and treated her as a true partner in all things. A year after their wedding, Lila discovered she was pregnant. Quinn's joy was boundless, and he immediately became protective to the point of being comical, insisting she rest more and not do heavy work. She tolerated his fussing with good humor, touched by the depth of his care. Their son was born in the autumn of 1885, a healthy baby with Quinn's gray eyes and Lila's dark hair. They named him Samuel, after Quinn's father, and Quinn held the tiny infant with such reverence that Lila fell in love with him all over again. "He is perfect," Quinn whispered, tears streaming down his face as he looked at their son. "Just like his mother." "We made him together," Lila said softly. "He is part of both of us." Motherhood came naturally to Lila, and she marveled at the fierce love she felt for this small person they had created. Quinn was a devoted father, helping with nighttime feedings despite his long days of work, and spending every free moment with Samuel. Jack, for his part, became an honorary grandfather, carving toys and telling stories and spoiling the baby shamelessly. The ranch continued to prosper under Quinn and Lila's joint management. She proved to have a head for numbers and helped him negotiate better prices for their cattle. They were able to hire on 2 permanent ranch hands, easing the workload and allowing them to expand their operation. The Rocking V became known throughout the territory as a well-run outfit, and other ranchers sought Quinn's advice. When Samuel was 2, Lila became pregnant again, and this time they welcomed a daughter they named Margaret, after Lila's mother. She had Lila's green eyes and Quinn's stubborn chin, and from the moment she could crawl, she was following her brother around and getting into everything. Life was not always easy. There were hard seasons when rain did not come and they lost cattle. There were illnesses that swept through the territory and left them afraid. There were disagreements and hard conversations, the normal struggles of any marriage and any business. But through it all, Quinn and Lila faced everything together, their love a constant anchor in changing times. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Quinn took Lila back to the ridge where he had proposed. The children were with Jack, giving them a rare evening alone. They sat together watching the sun set, Quinn's arm around Lila's shoulders, and reflected on how far they had come. "Do you ever think about that day in Henderson's store?" Quinn asked. "Sometimes," Lila admitted. "Not as often as I used to. It feels like another lifetime, something that happened to someone else. I think about it often. I think about how close I came to walking past, to minding my own business. I think about how different my life would be if I had not stopped. But you did stop. That is what matters." Quinn turned to face her, taking her hands in his. "You have given me everything, Lila. A family, a purpose, beyond just keeping the ranch going. A reason to build something that lasts. I want you to know that I have never regretted a single moment. Never question that you are exactly where you are supposed to be. I feel the same way, Lila said, her voice thick with emotion. I was so lost before I met you, so broken. You put me back together and showed me that I was worth saving. You taught me how to love and be loved. How can I ever thank you for that? You do not have to thank me. Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done. He kissed her softly. You were worth more than gold from the moment I laid eyes on you, and every day since has only proven it more. They stayed on the ridge until the stars came out, talking and dreaming about the future. They wanted more children, wanted to expand the ranch, wanted to grow old together, watching their family flourish. It was a simple dream, but it was theirs, built on a foundation of love that had started in the most unlikely of circumstances. Years passed in a blur of birthdays and holidays, of roundups and branding seasons, of watching their children grow. Samuel proved to have his father's way with horses, while Margaret showed her mother's skill with numbers and organization. They added 3 more children to their family, 2 more sons and another daughter, and the house that had once seemed so empty was now constantly filled with laughter and noise and life. Jack stayed with them until he passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, surrounded by the family he had helped raise. They buried him on the ridge overlooking the ranch, and Samuel, now a young man of 20, carved the headstone himself. His loss left a hole in all their hearts, but they took comfort in knowing he had lived to see everything they had built. Quinn and Lila took over Jack's stories, passing down the history of the ranch to their children and eventually their grandchildren. They told them about the wild early days of the territory, about building something from nothing, about courage and hard work and the importance of standing up for what was right. But the story they told most often, especially to their granddaughters, was about the day Quinn walked into Henderson's trading post and changed both their lives forever. They were honest about the darkness of that moment, about the injustice and the fear, but they emphasized how one person standing up could make all the difference. Your grandfather saw that I was worth saving when everyone else saw me as property, Lila would say, taking Quinn's weathered hand in her own. He taught me that my value did not come from what others thought of me, but from who I truly was. That is a lesson I hope all of you carry with you. Quinn, for his part, always added, and your grandmother taught me that the greatest treasures in life are the people we love. All the cattle and land and money in the world mean nothing if you do not have someone to share them with. She was worth more than gold then, and she still is now. On a warm spring day in 1928, Quinn and Lila celebrated their 44th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The Rocking V had grown into one of the most successful ranches in the territory, now the state of Arizona, spanning thousands of acres and supporting not just their family but several others who worked the land. But the success meant less to them than the family they had built, the legacy of love and respect they were passing down through the generations. As they stood together on the porch of the house that had been their home for so many years, watching the sun set over the land they had worked and loved, Quinn turned to Lila with a smile. "No regrets?" he asked. "Not a single one," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "You saved me, Quinn Vance, in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," he corrected gently. "You gave my life meaning and purpose. You turned a house into a home, and a lonely cowboy into the luckiest man alive." Lila looked out at the property, at the children playing in the yard, and the grandchildren helping with evening chores, at the life they had built from that terrible, wonderful day in 1883. She thought about how close she had come to losing everything, how a brother's betrayal had nearly destroyed her, and how a stranger's kindness had set her on a path to more happiness than she had ever imagined possible. "Tell me again," she said softly, "what you said to Henderson that day." Quinn knew exactly what she meant. He said it every year on their anniversary, a ritual they had maintained throughout their marriage. He pulled her close and spoke the words directly into her ear, his voice still strong despite his years. "You are worth more than gold. You always have been, and you always will be." Lila closed her eyes and let the words wash over her, feeling the truth of them in her bones. She had been bought with $40 and a kind heart, but she had been loved with a devotion that was truly priceless. She had been given a second chance at life, and she had seized it with both hands, building something beautiful and lasting from the ashes of her former existence. As the last rays of sunlight painted the Arizona sky in shades of gold and crimson, Lila Kendrick held her husband's hand and felt nothing but gratitude for the day her brother sold her for a rifle and bullets, and a cowboy proved that she was worth infinitely more than any price. Their love story had started in darkness, but had bloomed into something radiant and enduring, a testament to the power of compassion and the possibility of redemption. The stars began to appear overhead, the same stars that had witnessed the beginning of their journey together, and Quinn and Lila stood on their porch knowing that their story would live on through the children and grandchildren surrounding them. They had built more than a successful ranch. They had built a legacy of love, proving that even in the hardest of times and the most unlikely of circumstances, two people could find each other and create something that would last for generations. Their grandson, young Quinn Samuel, named after both his grandfather and great-grandfather, approached them with a question that would become part of the family lore. "Grandpa, why do you always say that Grandma is worth more than gold? Is gold not the most valuable thing?" Quinn looked down at the boy, then at his wife, his eyes full of the love that had never dimmed in over 4 decades of marriage. "Gold is shiny and can buy you things, but it cannot keep you warm on cold nights. It cannot give you children or grandchildren. It cannot laugh at your jokes or hold your hand when you are scared. Your grandmother has given me all those things and more. That is why she is worth more than all the gold in the world." The boy considered this with the seriousness of youth, then nodded as if Quinn had solved a great mystery. "I hope I find someone worth more than gold someday, too." "You will," Lila assured him, ruffling his hair. "And when you do, you hold on to them and never let them forget how precious they are. That is the secret to a happy life." As night fell completely over the rocking Vi Ranch, the family gathered inside for dinner, filling the house with warmth and noise and the beautiful chaos of multiple generations living and loving together. Quinn and Lila took their places at the head of the table, their hands clasped beneath it, united as they had been since that fateful day in Oatman. The meal was loud and joyous, with conversations overlapping and children giggling and the clatter of dishes being passed around. But through it all, Quinn and Lila would occasionally catch each other's eye and share a smile that spoke of shared history and deep understanding. They had weathered storms, both literal and figurative, had built a life from nothing, and had loved each other through every high and low. After dinner, when the dishes were cleared and the children had been put to bed, Quinn and Lila sat together in the main room that had witnessed so much of their life together. The fireplace crackled, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and they sat in the comfortable silence of two people who no longer needed words to communicate. "I am tired," Lila said eventually, leaning her head on Quinn's shoulder. "But it is a good tired, the kind that comes from a life well lived." "I know what you mean." Quinn kissed the top of her head. "Though I would live it all again in a heartbeat if it meant having you by my side." "Even the hard parts?" "Especially the hard parts. They made us appreciate the good ones more." Lila thought about all the years stretching behind them, all the moments both significant and mundane that had woven together to create the tapestry of their shared life. She thought about the girl she had been, terrified and betrayed, and the woman she had become, strong and loved and surrounded by family. The journey between those 2 points had been made possible by one man's decision to see her value when no one else would. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for saving me, for loving me, for giving me this beautiful life." Quinn pulled her closer, his voice rough with emotion. "No, my love, thank you. Thank you for trusting me, for taking a chance on a lonely cowboy with more land than sense. Thank you for being my partner, my wife, my everything. You were the missing piece I did not even know I was looking for." They sat together as the fire burned low, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something that would endure long after they were gone. The ranch would continue under their children's care, the family would grow and flourish, but the foundation would always be the love story that started in a dusty trading post in 1883. Years later, when they were both in their 80s and slowing down but still sharp of mind and tender of heart, they made one final trip to the ridge. Their children wanted to stop them, worried about the journey, but Lila insisted and Quinn supported her as he always had. They sat on the same spot where Quinn had proposed so many decades ago, looking out over the ranch that had grown beyond their wildest dreams. The sun was setting, painting the sky in those familiar shades of gold and crimson, and they held hands like they had that first time. "It is beautiful," Lila said softly. "Everything we built together. I am so proud of what we accomplished." "I am proud of you," Quinn replied, "for being strong enough to survive what happened to you, brave enough to trust again, and wise enough to see what we could build together. You took a terrible situation and turned it into something magnificent. We did it together. That is what made it work." Quinn nodded, watching the sun dip toward the horizon. "I want you to know something, Lila. If I had to live my life over again, I would not change a single thing. Every decision, every moment, every joy and sorrow led me to you. That makes it all worthwhile." Tears streamed down Lila's weathered cheeks. "I feel the same way. Even the pain of losing my parents, even Thomas's betrayal, it all led me to that trading post on the exact day you would be there. How can I regret anything that brought me to you?" They sat in silence as the sun completed its descent, the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. Around them, the land they had worked and loved for over 4 decades whispered its secrets to the evening breeze. Somewhere below, lights were coming on in the ranch house, their family gathering for another meal, another evening together. "Ready to go back?" Quinn asked eventually. "In a moment. I want to remember this exactly as it is right now. You and me and this place we love, all together one more time." "One more time," Quinn agreed, though they both knew there would be many more times, many more sunsets watched together from this ridge or the porch or wherever they happened to be. Their love had proven itself durable through time and trial, and it would carry them through whatever years remained. When they finally made their way back to the house, moving slowly but steadily, they were greeted by worried children and excited grandchildren and the warm glow of home. The evening passed in the usual pleasant chaos, but Quinn and Lila carried with them the peace of knowing their story was complete, their legacy secure. They lived several more years, never spending a night apart, never taking each other for granted. They held hands during meals and sat close during family gatherings and still looked at each other with the same love that had sparked in Henderson's trading post so long ago. When Quinn finally passed at the age of 87, Lila held his hand and whispered that she would see him soon, that this was not goodbye, but just a temporary separation. She followed him 6 months later, dying peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by photographs of their life together. Their children buried them side by side on the ridge, with a single headstone that read, "Quinn and Lila Vance, partners, lovers, best friends, worth more than gold." The rocking V continued to thrive under the management of their descendants, each generation adding their own chapter to the family story, but they always remembered the founding story, the tale of a young woman sold by her brother and a cowboy who recognized her true worth. It became a legend passed down through the family, a reminder that love could bloom in the darkest of circumstances and that one moment of courage could change not just 2 lives, but generations to come. In the main house of the ranch, now over 100 years old, but lovingly maintained, hung a simple frame containing $40 in old coins, the very same coins Quinn had given Lila that day in 1883. Beside it was the Winchester rifle and a box of bullets, purchased by the family after Thomas died broke and alone years later, never having found redemption or peace. The contrast between those items told the whole story better than words ever could. One represented a brother's betrayal and greed, the value he had placed on his sister's life. The other represented a stranger's kindness and the beginning of a love that had lasted over 60 years and touched countless lives. Together, they served as a reminder that people always had a choice in how they treated others, and those choices rippled out in ways they could never fully predict. On quiet evenings, when the current generation of Vances gathered in that same main room where Quinn and Lila had spent so many peaceful hours, they would look at those artifacts and feel connected to the past. They would tell the story again to new spouses and wide-eyed children, keeping the memory alive, honoring the courage and love that had made everything else possible. And somewhere, in whatever place souls went after this life, Quinn and Lila Vance held hands and watched over the family they had created, satisfied that their story had not ended but transformed into something eternal. They had proven that one act of kindness could change the world, that love was indeed worth more than gold, and that even the darkest beginnings could lead to the brightest of endings. Their legacy lived on in every child who learned to value people over possessions, in every person who stood up for someone who could not stand up for themselves, in every couple who chose partnership and respect over power and control. The Rocking V Ranch stood as a monument to their love. Thousands of acres of Arizona desert transformed by hard work and dedication, but more importantly by two people who had found each other when they needed it most and built something beautiful together. The land would endure, the family would grow, and the story would be told and retold generation after generation, a testament to the power of seeing worth where others saw only commodities, of offering hope where others offered only despair. In the end, that was the true measure of Quinn and Lila's love. Not in the acres they accumulated or the children they raised or the years they spent together, though all those things mattered. The true measure was in how they had transformed each other, how they had taken brokenness and forged it into strength, how they had proven that a person's worth was intrinsic and could neither be bought nor sold, only recognized and treasured. Their story became legend, but it was a legend grounded in truth. In the very real moment when a cowboy walked into a trading post and decided that a young woman's life mattered more than minding his own business, that single decision had cascaded through time, creating ripples that touched hundreds of lives and would continue touching lives for generations to come. It proved that heroes did not need to be larger than life. Sometimes they just needed to be brave enough to do the right thing when the moment called for it. And so the story of Quinn and Lila Vance lived on, told around dinner tables and whispered to children at bedtime, a reminder that even in the rough and tumble world of the Wild West, where life was hard and justice often uncertain, love could still flourish. A brother had sold his sister for a rifle and bullets, seeing only his own needs and desires. But a cowboy had looked at that same woman and seen gold, precious and irreplaceable, and in recognizing her worth, he had found his own fortune in the form of a love that would last beyond a lifetime. Their happily ever after was not a fairy tale ending where all problems disappeared and life became easy. It was something better and more real, a partnership built on mutual respect, a love that deepened with each passing year, a family that flourished under their care, and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. They had taken the worst day of Lila's life and transformed it into the beginning of something beautiful, proving that endings could also be beginnings and that sometimes being worth more than gold meant being priceless.